Welcome to the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. I am your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. And man, we are right there. You can feel it. You can taste it. You can touch it. The NFL draft that we've been talking about endlessly for months. An exciting time for the Broncos. They've turned the corner. They've got a pick in the first round that could make a difference. And this team going from 10 wins to possibly winning a division title. It is a huge 3 days for the Broncos. They've talked of the importance of having a great offseason. Free agency went well. But now the draft, where you really build winning teams. You do not win championships in free agency. So we cannot overstate the importance of the draft, and we can't overstate the importance of this draft. They got a quarterback, but they're not done yet. We're going to talk about all that with Parker Gabriel and Luca Evans, my colleagues from the Denver Post. They have been absolutely grinding on this draft with every type of story you need, from mocks to previews to local kids that could go. So I want to basically steal their knowledge, because I was at Nuggets last night until 3 a.m. watching a terrific game, an unfortunate result. But now we're creeping right to the draft. What will the Broncos do with that 20th pick? What are the goals? What are they looking to accomplish over these 3 days? We're going to talk with all of that with Parker Gabriel and Luca Evans coming up after the break. Have you been injured at work or hurt in a car wreck? What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggatt Injury Law a call. Their motto with us is personal. I've known Darby Hoggatt forever. We traveled around the country watching our boys play baseball. We became good friends. Many of his clients become good friends with Darby. He's just that kind of guy. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the one writing checks to you. Again, if you've been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work, give Darby a call. It's 1-833-HOGGATT. That's 1-833-HOGGAT, or visit the website at hoggattlaw.com. Welcome to the Broncos podcast. It is now my pleasure to bring in two of the best from the Denver Post, our beat writers. That's Parker Gabriel and Luca Evans. You guys have known Parker for the last couple of years. Luca joined the beat a few months ago. He hit the ground running like Juju up at CU, running for his life. He's scrambling. He's doing everything. This has been a fun time. I love the way we've been able to accent our coverage with you two. It's just really been supplemented well. So I want to first say hello. Are you immersed? Are you ready? What's it like, Parker? Luca, you guys ready for the draft?
Yeah, let's get it over with.
What about you?
Yeah, I was at Nuggets until 2 a.m. with you last night, Troy. So I'm still recovering, but I'm ready to. It feels like we've been talking about what could happen for about a month straight. So I'm ready to finally nail something down.
What do you think is the more intense activity at 2 a.m.? Is it trying to wrap up Nuggets coverage after a close playoff loss, or is it sitting up with a 3-month-old?
Probably yours. Yours.
I think it's about even. All things. No. If you're up at 2 a.m., you're up at 2 a.m. It doesn't matter
that's true.
What you're doing.
The thing about, and I haven't been a father of a child of that age in 26 years, 25. It's been a while. My kids are all grown out of college, but at least with writing, you feel like you can control it. With a baby, you're at the mercy of the mood. Like they're going to sleep, maybe they're not, maybe they want to eat, maybe they don't.
He's in control at all times.
Yeah. So Parker is enjoying fatherhood. I mean, what a time to be a new dad, along with the draft. And so, listen, what is the latest? Let's start right there. What is the latest chatter we're hearing? And I prefaced that with yesterday. I was surprised when I saw Ian Rappaport on KOA say he wouldn't be shocked if the Broncos moved up in the first round to get a receiver. That surprised me only because that's not Sean Payton's DNA. I know he drafted Brandon Cooks once in the first round, but typically he has a type of receiver, 6'3", 215, and he pretty much feels like he could turn a fire hydrant into a guy who could catch 50 passes. So the idea they would move up. So what are you guys hearing in terms of that first round? What is some of the latest buzz? We'll start with you, Parker, then go to you, Luca.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is that George Paton literally said that he's talked to pretty much everybody. And the Broncos, every team says this. The Broncos really do this. They want the price on everything. They weren't in on Cooper Kupp, but they wanted to know what it would cost to sign him. You can find countless examples of that. So, I think mostly it's due diligence and considering, trying to figure out what it costs. I mean, I think, Luke and I have talked about this a lot. There's so many teams that are in trade back mode in this draft, that at some point you might get good value going up because it's a buyer's market, so to speak, going up. Now, then the other part of it is I don't doubt that there are certain players, maybe Ashton Genty, maybe Tet McMillan, who, if they got to a certain point where they're not expected to get to, would Denver consider going up? Sure. Yeah, I think so. But, it's sort of like last year, if Jaden Daniels had made it to 4 or 5, I think they would have maybe tried to be really aggressive to go up and get Jaden Daniels. The odds of that happening were always around 0. But you always want to be ready in case the unexpected happens and you have the opportunity to go up and do something kind of wild.
Yeah. So who are we talking about, Luca, there? We're talking about what? Tet McMillan, Golden from Texas, Luther Burden, and Ibuka. I probably missed that. The Ohio State. Well, I don't know if you'd have to move up for those latter two, but you certainly probably would for McMillan from Arizona, who I think you saw in person a couple times, right? Like, is that a guy worth moving up for? Or is that their next Cortland Sutton? What do you think?
I don't think. I mean, when you look at kind of what they need, I still think they would probably prefer to prioritize a running back or a tight end in those earlier rounds if they're looking at skill position guys. And I don't know that McMillan is that much of a head and shoulders above the rest of his class. I really like Ibuka for Sean Payton's offense as kind of a do everything guy. I think there's a number of fits if they do end up sitting there. But George Payton has said they like sitting at 20 in this draft. He said that last week, just in terms of this, again, if it's a deeper draft, you want to be picking a little bit later. And so I think it makes most sense for teams to try to move back in this draft than move up. But it doesn't feel like there's a set guy as opposed to last year that Denver might have their eyes on, as opposed to just kind of playing out a lot of different scenarios that could take place. But I don't think, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it would make that much sense for them to move up and take a McMillan or take an Ibuka or Golden or whatever it is. But, Sean Payton has been aggressive in the past, and if he likes his guy, he's going to get him.
It's sort of interesting, Troy, that report was like specifically about wide receiver. Albert Breer this morning was sort of mentioned them as a trade up candidate too. This could all be, I think it's worth pointing out that last year after they drafted Bo Nix, like Sean Payton gleefully pointed out that he was an active participant in making it seem like Denver wanted to come up to get JJ McCarthy. So, I think one way to look at this is that the Raiders might just be sitting there thinking that they're going to just comfortably wait until 6 and take Ashton Genty.
Right.
And maybe someone out there wants them to not feel that comfortable. I don't know that that's what this is, obviously. But the other part of it is like, I don't know. I wrote about this in sort of like mocking up some trade scenarios just in terms of like where pick value is the other day. Like, I don't think Ashton Genty's getting, toward 10 necessarily. Chicago would be thrilled probably if he ended up at number 10, even though they could use a tackle and some other stuff too. But like Sean Payton has said a lot of times, like he always says this, like, what teams you can deal with and what teams are harder to deal with. And like one team that he knows how to deal with is New Orleans and Mickey Loomis. Yeah. And New Orleans is sitting at 9 and maybe they want a quarterback and maybe 9 is, they don't want Jackson Dart or Shadur Sanders at number 9. And so like, I don't know if Ashton Genty got to 9. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's where that wouldn't match what Ian Rappaport said about a receiver, which you want to talk receivers, like obviously Travis Hunter, but he's probably going to go number 2. But like if Genty got to 9, that's where I would start thinking like, okay, that 2026 number 1 is probably burning a hole in Sean's pocket.
Yeah, I mean, Luca was breaking my heart with his mock draft with a defensive tackle in the first round. He doesn't understand the role of a columnist on deadline. I was
just going to go home.
I had to be a little boring.
No, but there's value there. What's interesting about this is Sean Payton gleefully participates in the misinformation game. He loves it. He talks to a lot of the national reporters. I know this for a fact. He gets their knowledge and he sprinkles in a little bit, kind of plays the game. And then next thing you know, the Broncos are doing this or that. And the JJ McCarthy thing wouldn't go away. And it started from the Vikings play-by-play guy announcer.
Yeah.
Like a friend of a friend's telling me Paul Allen's like, oh, they're certainly in on McCarthy. And we're all like, I don't know that that's the case. Doesn't seem to fit what he wants. But this is who Peyton is. And to your point, Parker, if Sean Payton wants something, he typically goes and gets it. Like if we made the analogy the other day, like if Sean Payton's on the tee box, George Payton's the caddy. He's telling him, no, 3-iron, 3-iron, 3-iron. And there's Sean grabbing the driver. Let's go, baby.
No, I can clear the bunker. I can.
Yeah, I can get over it. No, you can't. So that being said, what do you think right now as we sit here on a Tuesday? So if you're all listening in your car or at work, we appreciate you, Broncos country. This could, it's obviously something could change before Thursday night. But what is your best guess, Luca? Thursday night, Broncos are on the clock. We hear the dun-dun-dun-dun. What is your best guess for the Broncos' first round pick?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've been on the TreVeyon Henderson line of thinking for a while. And I think, with nothing really to back it up, just the line in my head, see the connection makes too much sense in Sean Payton's offense. And I think with if they are honing in on a running back at 20, and I wrote about this the other day, but they still like Audric Estime. They took him in the 5th round last year and have had multiple conversations with his camp in the offseason that, they still like him. They see him as a part of the long-term puzzle at running back potentially. And so in that case, you're not going to take, if that is true, you're not going to take a power back, Marion Hampton, a 220-pound guy to pair with a 230-pound Estime. You're going to, ideally want a guy who can play in space, a guy who can, flare out of the backfield, who can thrive in pass protection. And that is TreVeyon Henderson to a T. So he just makes so much sense in Sean Payton's offense. And then the other part of me, and I did this in my mock draft, is like they could easily just take a defensive lineman and then fill the needs that they have at running back and tight end in the later rounds of the draft. Like Tennessee,
right.
Dylan Sampson is there in the 2nd or 3rd round. There's Gunnar Helm, Terrence Ferguson there. Maybe if Mason Taylor falls to the 2nd round, he's there. Like there's so many options. This is such a deep draft in terms of the skill positions that they could very easily say, hey, and they like Walter Nolan. If he's there, that's great value. So, my gut either says Henderson or defensive lineman.
And I'll move over to you, Parker. I mean, there's been a lot of connection, myself included, with Omari and Hampton. But, Luca brings up a good point. If you feel like Estime has a future here, that's how Henderson fits, is because at Ohio State, he basically was a 2-back guy the whole time, dealt with some injuries. But he was never a guy that was going to, he's not getting a Genty workload. Right. But what if Colston Loveland's there? Like, who do you think at 20? I know you've looked at multiple scenarios here, and Luca brings up a great thing. Nolan is great value. If you're just going, if you just rank him, absent of the board, with just his talent, great value. But is that what they'd want there? And then trust that one of those running backs is going to be there, or tight end is going to be there in the 2nd? Do you trade back and add picks? What do you think happens in the 1st round, whether it's 20 or they're picking somewhere else?
Yeah, I think it'd be fascinating if you got to 20 and like one of, or both, but let's say one of Hampton and Henderson is on the board and so is Colston Loveland at 20.
Right.
Like, I just think that would be a fascinating situation to be in, because obviously, like, they addressed tight end in free agency with Evan Engram. I don't think that should keep them from adding. And then like one of the things you hear just in like talking to people is, for whatever, there's so much lack of consensus in this draft. And it seems like there's a huge set of players who are somewhat similarly graded, not obviously dead even, but pretty similar after the top, like maybe 12 to 14 players. But one of the things you hear pretty consistently is that those 2 tight ends, Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland, like everybody thinks they're in that top group.
Right.
So if one of those guys gets to you at 20, do you just say, yeah, listen, we'll figure out running back on day 2. He's too good at a position that we still need firepower at to pass up. That to me would be very interesting. I don't think he's probably going to be there at 20. There's too many teams that could use a tight end ahead of them. Especially if, old friend Darren Muji with the New York Jets, like they're an offensive line candidate team at 7, but like if they take Tyler Warren at 7, now you're like kicking off the tight end thing early. And I just don't know how Loveland would like get down through all those other teams. So that's like one part of it. Listen, like the thing with Sean last year was he didn't care about the perceived notion of like value with Bo Nix. He was looking for a fit and a player that worked for his system. And like, one of the things is like every time I watch TreVeyon Henderson and every time I read somebody who knows a lot more about scouting prospects, like write up Henderson, I just think like, yeah, this is what they say they're looking for. This is literally like they want a guy who can hit the home run out of the backfield. They want a guy that is a good receiver and very like they want a guy who can protect the passer, can protect Bo Nix. He's the best in the class at that. And not only that, but like, I don't know, what is the job opening? Like, what is the job opening the Broncos have? It's replacing Javonte Williams snaps. Like, obviously, Javonte didn't have a lot of juice in the legs after the knee injury, but the thing that he did that nobody else on the roster could do, and the reason why he always played on third down was because he was reliable in blitz pickup and he could protect the passer and they didn't have to worry about him. They didn't have to leave extra guys in and whatever. And like, to me, it's not that Omarion Hampton can't do that stuff. I think he probably can and probably projects as a decent receiver, but like we already know TreVeyon Henderson can do these things. And that's why, to me, like if you have a similar grade on them at all, and if you're in that mode where it's like you don't have a true like top 10 guy available to you at number 20, like I'm not saying I know it's going to happen. I just think it feels Bo Nix-ish in the sense that like it's a guy who they have a lot of reasons to like and who looks from the outside like a pretty tight fit.
Yeah, and Troy, just to hop in here off Parker's point, talking to evaluators like you, if you want a true 3-down guy, like a bell cow guy, Hampton is what you want there. But Sean Payton, like has said, he prefers tandems and committees in the backfield and that sort of thing. And in that case, Henderson he's a better, I think the consensus is that Hampton is a better prospect overall in a vacuum, but Henderson is probably a better fit with Denver at 20 based on whatever happens.
Yeah, it's fascinating because of that fact that I can definitely see what both of you are saying regarding Henderson. I watched him a lot. He was, the top running back basically coming out of high school. He dealt with some issues, the hamstring issues, and then when he got paired with Judkins last year, he flourished because and I talked to people that are connected to the Ohio State program. They're like, his best fit would be in a tandem backfield, that if you overuse him, the likelihood he's going to get hurt increases dramatically. You see how he was used his last few years. But what's fascinating about Henderson to me, and Hampton could fit this too. I'm not down on Hampton as some are. I know there's the issue is, does he break enough tackles? Is he that much different than Javonte Williams of 3-4 years ago? Those are fair. I'm not saying that's not. What's fascinating about Henderson to me is the way they use their running back in the passing game and the number of targets. He was targeted, right? Parker and Lewis, second most Javonte Williams on the team last year, but he had no explosiveness in that passing game. So you're giving all these targets to a guy that has no explosiveness in the passing game. That's where the Henderson pick would make sense. It's because no coach throws more on first down than Sean Payton. And no coach wants to involve a running back more in the passing game than Sean Payton. So if you want to tell me they're going to use him that way, I get it. If you're going to tell me that he's going to get 8 carries and Estime's going to get 8 and Jalil's going to get 4, take me off. Miss me with that, because they don't get into rhythm, and then nobody's any good. It's like you have 3 guys and you have no guys. But if Henderson has a carved out role in the passing game, I like, and that's why, Parker, when you brought up Loveland, people ask me, why would they want Loveland? And I'm like, he's basically would run slot routes. They haven't had a true slot guy, it feels like, since Wes Welker when I was covering the team. But that's why a Loveland would make sense. And you can always use another tight end.
Right.
I mean, Ingram's not a long-term solution. So if they go running back, let's just play the hypothetical. Let's say they go Henderson. Where then does that leave them in second round? Because you guys have looked much deeper into the draft than I have in that. Is that still open it for if you look at the possibility that, hey, let's go get a tight end there with a Mason Taylor, one of the local kids, Gunnar Helm, I'd be probably heavy on second, but Terrence Ferguson, one of those, or defensive tackle, Luca, you talked about a deep draft. We'll start with you, Parker. Where do they go in second round if first round is a running back?
Yeah, I just want to make one really quick point on the running back thing. When they signed Samaje Perine, so take the 2 years of Denver where they just didn't have that caliber of running back in the
Right.
fold. But when Sean was in New Orleans, I wrote this when they signed Samaje Perine, his second running back in New Orleans averaged 155 touches a year on a 16-game schedule, and 9 times he had a back catch 70 passes in a season. So if he's got 2 backs, it's not just like, oh, you're the second running back. It's like
Right.
the second guy gets used a lot. And in this case, like the second guy could even be Audric Estime, right? Like that. So there's a lot of touches to go around in a Sean Payton offense if you've got 2 running backs that can do the job. As far as the second round, if they take a running back, like I would think it's more likely they go up from 51 than it is that they go up from 20.
Okay.
And that would be like, Mason Taylor, that they might really like Harold Fannin. They might really like Elijah Arroyo, the kid from Miami. There's like different flavors of tight end in this draft. It's a deep group, pretty deep group, especially on the first 2 days. Just like it is at running back, probably not that deep. But the thing about Taylor is there's just a lot of connections. Like they always know a lot about LSU guys. Brian Niedermeyer, who's the new QC on defense, coached him for a year in high school. Like there's a lot of things for the Broncos to like about Mason Taylor. And I just don't know that he's going to make it to 51 the way that he would. And you could just sit there and take him is if Arroyo goes, first, and Fannin goes before him. Those things are possible. But to me, like I like tight end in the second round. But there's also a bunch of defensive linemen, Tyleik Williams from Ohio State, TJ Sanders from South Carolina. There's a bunch of guys. Like it feels like, and watch the, maybe they'll take a receiver or a corner or whatever. But like, it seems to me that like the simplest way to think about this draft with no real clear answers is to just kind of piece together running back, defensive lineman, tight end over the first 3 rounds. And like, you're probably not going to get your preferred guy at all 3 positions doing that, just given, you got to go 85 picks deep. But like, to me, like if they take a running back in the first round, they should have, good options on the board at defensive line or tight end in the second.
Yeah, Luca, you're on the clock. What do you think at second round if they go running back, Henderson and or Hampton in the first round? What are we looking at?
Yeah, I agree with Parker that, I think Mason Taylor would be great value for them anywhere in the second round, even if they had to trade up to get him. And Parker and I were talking about this the other day, and Parker made a great point that, they obviously signed Evan Ingram, but they still need a guy to play a majority of snaps as a blocking, tight end. And that is a quality that they would need for a guy that they're looking at, in addition to someone who you said, Troy, who can kind of play in that slot receiver role. And for that, I look a lot at, and I'm not talking second round here, but you could reasonably wait till 3rd, 4th round to get, Gunnar Helm out of Texas, who, I wrote a story on him. He's a local kid, but obviously he spent 3 years at Texas almost purely blocking. And that's one of his greatest strengths. Obviously broke out as a receiver this past year, but to me, there's a lot of makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of connection there. He's, he played with Darren Rizzi's son at Texas Christian. There's just a lot of connections between Texas and Denver. And so, I look at him, but if you wanted to wait on a tight end, you could go them. Obviously, they've also shown a ton of interest in Terrence Ferguson, who is, Bo Nix's teammate. But in the second round, if they go running back first round, you could look at reasonably edge, a guy like Jordan Birch out of Oregon, like Parker was talking about with defensive linemen. You could even, if a receiver is there who ends up slipping a little bit, or you could, seems like Luther Burden is a guy who's slipping in drafts a little bit. If he's there at the top of the second round, maybe you look to move up and get him. So there's a lot of different options, but I do agree with Parker that I think it makes the most sense to check off, at least within the first 4 rounds, running back, defensive line, tight end. And then I think it makes sense, a receiver at some point there in the earlier rounds as well.
one of the things they won't be drafting is a long snapper because they signed a second one. So
That's right.
You two are going to be charting long snapper.
Crazy competition.
The
Yeah.
long snapper competition. I mean, I covered quarterback derbies. There was nothing worse than charting every pass in a training camp because you lose sight of the other stuff going on because you're so, immersed in that. So they signed a second long snapper. I'm like, what happened to Fraboni? Did I get hurt, in the offseason? But what is one sneaky area you think they will address on that final day? Like, because we know we all kind of agree there are three needs going in: a running back, tight end, and D-line fits based on it's not as pressing, but it is a need, and it certainly can be fit in this draft. What is another position, Parker? I'll go to you, that is kind of a sneaky spot that you think that we're going to look up on Saturday afternoon and go, oh yeah, that made total sense that they had to address that here.
Corner, maybe. I mean, like I think there's some. Well, they saw the face of God kind of when they had to put Levi Wallace in when Riley Moss got hurt last year, and so you have obviously like Chris Abrams-Drain played really well down the stretch, and I think they probably like him as part of that mix going forward. But I think you have questions, maybe longer term than that. Like Jaquan McMillan's a really good slot. It's not a this year problem, but like at some point you're going to have to decide whether you want to pay him, 12 to 15 million a year to be a starting upper echelon slot guy. Riley Moss is like more than proven he can play outside. So that's not really part of the conversation, but part of me wonders if long-term, what the Eagles did with Cooper DeJean is pretty interesting just in terms of like, he can play outside, but he's just a menace in the slot. He's big, he's physical. It's not just because, he's a white corner from Iowa like Riley Moss is. They just like that's a potential long-term role for Riley Moss. Maybe he'll stay outside. But I just think like you can never have too much depth. And plus like George Paton is probably, he doesn't usually go a whole draft without finding, a guy like Damari Mathis hasn't fully worked out, but you like the athletic traits. They took him in the 4th round. He's played a lot over the course of his rookie contract. He's actually maybe a cut candidate depending on sort of like where they end up cap wise in camp. So there's they've got, you could take anything day 3 and nobody really blinks. But to me, even if it's in the 3rd round, day 2, late day 2 into day 3, like I would think that they'll find a corner that they like somewhere along the way.
And real quickly on that, before you jump in, Luca, that's like Jaquan McMillan's great story. Plays with tenacity. There's an urgency to his game. I don't see any way in hell they pay him top money. I just don't.
Right.
Because Moss is going to come due. You're paying Surdan, not top of the market, but certainly premium. There's no way they're going to pay a slot guy and have 3 guys making big money. That's not a slight on him. That's just the reality of how you piece a roster together. Luca, what is the position Broncos country should keep an eye on, especially in the later portions of the draft?
Yeah, I agree with Parker about the secondary. I mean, they did a 30 visit with Keaton Crawford out of Nevada, and I think he's at safety. And I think he'd be really good value for them in 4th round. He's not going to slip to the 6th, but in kind of day 3, I also look at, offensive line. I think they've done due diligence on kind of a number of late round potential fits there. Nash Jones, Trey Whittig out of Indiana. I think it makes a lot of sense. Their front is pretty set, but Garrett Bowles is getting up there in age, and it's never a bad thing to kind of add depth on the lines. And I think particularly kind of getting a few solid backup developmental guys at some point, maybe one in the draft is a really good option for them. So I would definitely look at offensive line for them on day 3. And I'm going to throw out, I think there's maybe like a 0.1% chance that this happens, but I don't think Matt Hack is their day 1 guy at punter. They do like James Burnip out of Alabama. He might go in the draft.
Let's go.
I am gonna
122. Let's do it. 4th round.
Yeah, why not? We're gonna 6th round punter. I'm not gonna stand on that, but I'm just gonna toss that out into the ether.
If they draft a punter, I think our editor Matt Schubert might lose his mind. His head might explode. Matt, I got a cider 25 inches on the punter. Wait, what?
Yeah. I think, Troy, the thing about the offensive line is and Luca makes a good point. Like it's always after the fact that we do the like, wow, life comes at you fast in the NFL. But like they've basically had, this is going on year 3 where the only starter they will replace is Lloyd Cushenberry.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, but now you've got Luke Wattenberg's going into the final year of his deal at center. Ben Powers, their left guard, is going into this year with no guaranteed money left on his deal and a big cap number. And then Mike McGlinchey, this is the last year he's got guaranteed money on his deal. So I'm not saying that they're going to be replacing 3 starters after this year, but it's more likely they'd be replacing 3 than none. I mean, they're going to you can't pay everybody. We've talked about this with the secondary. It's a good problem to have when you have 5 players you like. But to me, like, I could see it sneaky being, you've got two vacancies on the offensive line maybe after this year. If injuries popped up again for McGlinchey, you just never know. Like, obviously you never want somebody to get hurt. You hope everybody plays healthy and plays as long as many years as they can and all that. It just, for all of the stability they've had on the offensive line, there's a come due date on that eventually. And it looks to me like that it's certainly not impossible that part of that bill comes due after this year. So if you've already got, young talent in the pipeline, there's some guys they like, Alex Palczewski, Alex Forsythe, a couple other guys more developmental, but that's a place where they could add some athleticism day 2 or day 3, and you wouldn't think twice about it.
Well, folks, if you've been listening, Broncos Country, this is Parker Gabriel and Luca Evans, both cover the Broncos for the Denver Post. I supplement the coverage, but these two do the legwork. They're in there every day, boots on the ground, if you will. And there's no better place to find coverage, from feature stories, takeout Sunday features, to we got a draft visits, top 30 visits tracker, to Parker's trade scenarios, showing you how the value of trades work. Like, if you go back through, it's just like the last 2-3 weeks of our coverage, I don't know how you would feel like you're missing anything. Frankly, we've covered every scenario. So we'll finish with this, guys. The draft is fascinating. It's so much hype around it. And it's this blend of college football fandom and the NFL. And a lot of college football fans, I'm convinced, don't watch the NFL. And I know a lot of NFL fans don't watch college football, but it blends these two. So you get this hyperbole and these great expectations, and it's fun. I mean, it's just blender of emotions and school loyalty and the passions from professional and collegiate sports. But it's best when there's chaos. So we're going to finish with that. Like, and I'll start it with mine, that if I had a scenario that was like, if I could pick and script, and I'm a columnist, so I want the story. I'm rooting for the story here. I'll start with, for some crazy reason, Ashton Jeanty starts to fall, and the Broncos identify him as their Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, their next Terrell Davis. Terrell was a 6th rounder, but as a guy that's going to anchor alongside Bo Nix, and somehow they feel like they could get to 10, not inside the top 10. We're not doing that. We got some sanity here, but they move up for Jeanty in this crazy, chaotic world. That's like my pipe dream, that they get a running back, and it's one of the best running backs we've seen since Barry Sanders in college. Luca, will go to you. Captain Chaos, the Russ Westbrook draft, first round. What happens for you that would make it most fascinating?
Hear me out. Shedeur Sanders, Bo Nix, quarterback competition. No, I'm just kidding. I think, to me, the most interesting scenario, well, you mentioned Jeanty. I'll go to a different skill position spot if he ends up falling. I haven't seen, and I saw him when I was covering USC and they played Penn State, so I'm a little biased, but I don't think there's a more natural, like, oh my God, this guy would be unreal in Sean Payton's offense than Tyler Warren. Like, the way that Penn State used him last year, he was a ball carrier out of the backfield at times. He lined up in every position imaginable. He's just a matchup nightmare. Like, in terms of as a receiver with Sean Payton, that would just be an absolutely nightmare combination. And I know the Jets like him at 7. I don't see him falling out of the top 12, but if he does, or he ends up sliding a little bit, and he's Sean Payton's guy, I don't think it would be a bad move in any way to trade up and get him, because he and Ingram in a tandem in Sean Payton's offense would be, that would give Bo Nix a lot of weapons. So that would be my I'll throw that out as a chaos scenario.
You'd sign me up for that. I mean, he would be like Taysom Hill on, caffeinated Taysom Hill. Just this guy. I mean, I see that USC game. He lined up at center and ended up catching it as the snapper. Yep. I was like, wait, they got a center who I had been watching, but I was like, oh, that's the dude that has like 19 catches today. He is as dominant a player in college last year as outside of, I guess, Genty. But you could sign me up for that. I would absolutely love that. Parker, you're the scenario you would love to see and have some fun with a little bit of chaos in the first round.
Yeah, I think to your point, those two guys are the two players I think that you'd most like to see it, Sean Payton get his hands on from an offensive standpoint. I would even give maybe Warren the slight edge. Not talking like as a prospect, just in terms of like how fun it would be to watch in a Sean Payton offense. Yeah, I mean, Captain Chaos, like, preface this by saying it will not happen. But like, I would be interested if, okay, Tennessee goes chalk at 1 and takes Cam Ward. And then if Cleveland were to take Abdul Carter and the Giants took a quarterback, Shadur Sanders, like, I don't know how anyone would move New England off of just taking Travis Hunter. But if there was a true like sell the farm scenario, it would be if Travis Hunter got out of the top 3. Like, that would be where, and it could be the Broncos, or it could be, I mean, like, it would be anybody. Yeah. Teams would be lining up to try to get up to take him. But like, I don't know. You watch Sean talk to him after the pro day or showcase or whatever they called it in Boulder, and you hear, oh, well, the Broncos could trade up for a receiver. Like, who's the receiver they would trade up for? The logical answer is probably McMillan, just based on body type and all that. But like, I don't know. Travis Hunter's a pretty good receiver. So if you're talking like pure chaos scenario, let's see the Broncos try to put the chips in to get into the top 5. And it's like, you're talking like 20, next year's 1, and Nick Bonito plus probably. But like, or 20, next year's 1 and Nick Bonito to get to 4 to take Travis Hunter. Like, that would be a wild scenario that will never happen, but we would have web traffic until the end of time if it did.
Yeah, Shadur versus Bo Nix in a quarterback battle. They trade up for Travis Hunter. Jeez, I was the conservative one here, wanting Genty. I love where your guys' heads are. Guys, again, Broncos country, please check out all the work at denverpost.com/sports/Broncos. The Parker and Luca have you covered in everything you could possibly want. Again, from top 30 visits to mock drafts to takeout features on the previous free agent class to everything you could possibly glean about the draft. It's Thursday night. All 3 of us will be there all 3 days. It's a fun time. It's an odd time because it's just when they're at 20, I think 20, I think is when I covered the Garrett Bowles draft. Yep. I think he was 20. It's just because everything feels possible, then nothing feels possible. And you get into that 2.5 hour range of, so if they stay put, that's why if they trade back, that's the ultimate buzzkill. They get to that and then trade out. As a writer, you're like, I got to write a column on Deadline, 850 words in 40 minutes on trading back. So I'm rooting for.
I didn't actually take anybody.
Yeah, I'm rooting for staying put, running back, tight end. But you guys are the best. Again, Broncos country, I can't thank you enough for your support. I will have Luca and Park on regularly. Sometimes I'll be on the Denver Post podcast as well. You can check us out there periodically. I could not do this pod without Danny Bailey behind the screen, the producer, and Nate Lundy at Mile High Sports, and of course, Darby Hoggatt from Hoggatt Injury Law. Broncos country, I do this pod for you. Happiness that begins with me. Have a great day.